Who could stop Rakdos Lizards? What about mono-white wielding wizards? Golgari Talent is always looking to gain, but beware the return of classic domain.
It only flops if it hops. Comment below as we walk through the Week 3 recap of Bloomburrow Standard. This past weekend featured 4 major tournaments, all in the form of MTGO challenges, leaving us to dissect the 32 top 8 spots and 4 trophies as we sifted for our weekly gems.
Domain managed to stay at the top this week with 7 top 8s, but 0 trophies. Queen Atraxa went back to her classic form, embracing Archangels, Sunfalls, and Beanstalks once again.
Rakdos Lizards continued its run with 6 top 8s, but also failed to clinch a trophy. We haven't seen the deck evolve this week, but given the Kindred constraints, I doubt it'll shift in any major way as we continue.
Mono White Control is the breakout story this week with 3 top 8s and a trophy, propelling it from theory to reality as Boros Control evolved into this latest form.
And Dimir Aggro is back with 3 top 8s and a trophy of its own, highlighting the return of counterspells to the top of the heap.
Now down in Tier 2 land, we see Azorius Cookies continuing its one-man run with a single top 8 that did result in a trophy.
And Golgari Talent managed to place 3 pilots into various top 8s as well, but could not take down a title.
Oh man, Gruul Slickshot only managed 2 top 8 slots, but the bird continues to be the word for another week as it competes with Lizards to see which aggro deck will come out on top.
And last but not least, Boros Convoke is back despite only a single top 8, due to that pilot turning it into a trophy and reminding the rest of the meta that going wide with Imidanes is still tough to handle.
Yeah, over in the Brewer's Corner, I'll walk you through Rakdos Fling and Boros Mighty Mouse this week.
And I'll cover Orzhov Breach and my very own brew, Bunny Convoke.
Oh yeah, but first, on to our Tier 1 archetype breakdowns, starting with Domain.
So Nick 987321 made it to the finals of Saturday's 63-player MTGO Challenge before falling to a very traditional Boros Convoke list. However, the bigger story here is the departure from Deadly Cover-Up and Urgent Necropsy, shifting back to that BANT base that we've seen for multiple seasons now. So let's get into it. As far as I can tell, Max, Rakdos Lizards is the likely reason that this archetype is forced back to that traditional life gain and grind kind of build, featuring those 3 the 3 lockdowns and 4 Archangels in the main. And we also see that sideboard has been simplified as well with those 3 smites, 3 frillbacks, 3 negates, 3 Baloths. It's shifting nicely, and the 2 Jace in the main suggest that hedge for the mirror, as well as the fact that we're seeing more of the mill strategies come out to compete with the dominance of domain and the dominance of the white control builds. Like, Jace is everywhere right now, so I'm not surprised to see 2 of these in the main. It's a great hedge to start with. And there's a ton of enchantment hate also in this build, so I love where it's at.
Yeah, one matchup that I'm not really seeing too much prep for is really the mid-range matchup. Do you see Domain shifting to more board wipes, like going back to Deadly Cover-Up or even Starfall Invocation, as mid-range decks tend to become more popular around this phase of the meta? Or are the Archangels and the Sunfalls enough?
I mean, when you've got Beanstalks, you've already got the grind, right? And you've got Jace, so that if the grind goes too deep and they run you out of win cons with their own, like, Deadly Cover-Ups, you're able to just go into the mill strategy, and that's your backdoor through. So I'm not sure that we really care so much. I mean, mid-range for Domain, it should be your bread and butter. You should be winning a majority of those. The scariest thing a mid-range deck can do to Domain is start playing creatures with haste, because there's no easy way to account for those outside of ley lines. So if you have hasty creatures and enchantment removal, that's kind of the ticket for mid-range to compete with Domain.
Yeah, definitely. Rakdos Lizards is the next deck, and I just want to emphasize how well this deck theoretically should do against Domain.
So Rakdos Lizards never made it to the finals, much less secured a trophy, but it sure snagged a ton of top 8 slots this past weekend. Now, Guillote's build shown here is on par with the average build you're going to see around the ladder, so let's talk about what is and isn't working for this archetype. Now, there is a little tech here, the 1 Malicious Eclipse sitting in the sideboard. You look at this and you're like, this is going to kill so many of my own creatures, why would I play this? The mirror. You play it for the mirror. because these Glistening Deluges are great against other decks like Convoke, but against the Mirror specifically, I'm assuming that is exactly why that's sitting here. Let's also note that there's a Bitter Triumph taking the place of Go for the Throat, which to me is a clear nod to the rise in decks like Azorius Cookies, where they have Steel Seraph and Friction Fleshgorger sitting in Dimir sideboard. Like, you just can't go too far into the Go for the Throats. And I know there's 4 in the main here, but the fact that we're seeing 1 Bitter Triumph from the side, I think we're going to start seeing more copies of Shoot the Sheriff or Bitter Triumph come into the main board of Rakdos Lizards, and that's going to be the evolution to hedge against those artifact creatures that are gaining life.
Okay. We haven't seen this deck change much since week 1. Would you say this list is solved for the most part? Does it have any flex slots? Can it make room for more removal, perhaps, or early interaction to contend with those go big decks?
I think it can shift a bit. Yeah, we're seeing the Mudflat Village when I think Rockface Village is far more interesting, because getting that speed, like a hasty, laughing Jasper Flint, is a lot to deal with. And I don't think we care as much about the grind. We already have the grind in the form of Urbrask's Forge, so I don't know that we need to try to start bringing creatures back from the grave, especially in a format with 4 Sunfall in the main of so many decks. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me to say let's try to grab stuff back from the grave versus let's give these lizards haste and really get in and deal some damage.
Yeah, I'd say that's especially the case here with this deck. In any event, let's talk about another deck that grinds really well, Mono White Control.
Tulio Wadi smashed a 73-player MTGO challenge on Sunday, avenging the prior day's loss in the finals against Mogged on Dimir by winning that exact same matchup against a different pilot on Dimir to take it all down. Now, I'm a huge fan of Tulio's latest concoctions, so I kind of want to break down where this has evolved, because we've seen Tulio play over the last few weeks different builds of Boros Control until we got to this. So first and foremost, for everybody that's still on Fortune, no, play Sanguine Evangelist. This is so key. The fact that it triggers Caretakers on the way in and on the way out, great. It does a fantastic job on that front. But here's the spice that I love about Sanguine Evangelist. When you pair it post-board against Domain with Imidane's Recruiter, you have so many ways to be like a mini Convoke list in a weird way. You know, like you play out a Sanguine Evangelist, they have to deal with 2 threats, and then you have the ability late game to go like Sanguine into Imidane's Smack. And that is a lot of damage, right? Similarly, I think that's why there's Carrot Cakes in this build instead of the Fortune Seekers. They wanted to get more triggers off of Caretaker's Talent, and that's how this build was positioned.
Okay. I do like this build a lot. I think this deck grinds really well. I'm sure Athena is running it as we speak. But my big question, something that I kind of see as a blind spot, we might see the return of some reanimation, some graveyard play, if we're not already. Do you think this deck needs to concern itself with that and make room for something like Rest in Peace in the sideboard?
I mean, you can go into Rest in Peace, you can go into Kutzils. This deck has enough flexibility in how you can build it, and it doesn't rely on the grave. So if you are worried about specific archetypes, you can hedge for them pretty hard. The weakness to me of White Control right now is that it doesn't have a good plan for Jace. Like, the amount of times that I've been milled out when I'm playing this war has been high, and it's not a pleasant experience. Because Domain, you can go card for card. You can match them on parity and then get them with an Imidane's with haste. But if they're on the triple quad Jace plan post board, you're not going to get there. They're going to mill you out. So it's a struggle. It's a struggle, and that's probably the weak point and why we're seeing like a copy of Stonebrain running around in that sideboard to try to give you that weird extra out to that. Yeah,
that makes a ton of sense. Look, we've been talking about this meta in the MTG Rebellion Discord, and I've been talking all week about how we're getting back to a rock, paper, scissors meta. So, with that being said, let's talk about the next list in Tier 1, Dimir Aggro.
So Mogged took down a 40-player MTGO challenge this past Saturday with Dimir, handling Mono White Control to clinch that trophy, and let's talk about why this is working. So first and foremost, I kind of figured this was going to be on the docket with Domain's rise to the top again, because this has been a natural counter to Domain for many seasons now. And in a world of Domain and Boros Control, Dimir it's a strong choice. And we're also seeing a little bit of tech here coming from Mogged with this Plume Creed Escort. This is spicy. I mean, when you have the ability to protect that early bat, that early Siren, or just later in the game, making sure your Gix or Shelly stays alive, it's not a small thing. It's not a small thing. And the fact that you have an evasive creature that's going to beat face, draw cards with Gix, and protect something else, it does a lot as a one-of. I agree, 1 is probably all we want to do, but the fact that it's in there is excellent. That said, I look at this, there's only actually 4 counters in the main. You get another 4 in the board, but I think that's an acknowledgement to how powerful Cavern of Souls is right now, that we can't go deep into counterland. We have to have more of a aggression build that happens to have incidental counters to maintain tempo.
Yeah, when I saw that, my first question was going to be why no counter spells? But yeah, that's a great acknowledgement. We have to point out Cavern of Souls doing its job. I am happy to see this deck back in action. I would say this is more classic Dimir Aggro. But my big question, one of the flaws I've seen in past iterations, is does this particular list have enough power in this current standard environment to push through?
I think it does. It's not going to be able to grind as well as it needs to with decks like Golgari, but we're not seeing a lot of Golgari. It's gotten pushed out pretty heavily lately. So if you're going to go up against Control, if you're going to go against Domain, and if you're going to go against the grindier builds of that like Mono White / Boros Control that aren't playing all the Helixes and Torch the Towers anymore, they're playing Sorcery Speed Interaction, I think you're ideally positioned, in fact. Like you're going to struggle a lot with decks that go under you, which is why that sideboard had like 5 sweepers in it. But you can still get there, and Mogg proved that. I mean, they went right through Mono White Control at the finale, which tells you the deck was ready for it.
Yeah, there's something to be said about calling this aggro and not Dimir mid-range. It can certainly go underneath the other decks that try to grind. But yeah, that does it for Tier 1. I'm excited for all these Tier 1 archetypes. I hope you are as well. Comment below. Let us know which one you're the most excited about. Let's jump down into Tier 2, and let's talk first about Azorius Cookies. So, a single trophy by Hamuda and Azorius Cookies remains relatively unchanged from last week. However, let's talk about the small shifts that are present and where the deck places in the current meta. We are seeing 1 Destroy Evil, 3rd Saw Blade exchange this week for a double Case of the Gateway Express. So I think that this shift just signifies the fact that we are seeing a little bit of mid-range, a few tougher creatures that tend to act like walls, and in order to get rid of them, you need something like Case of the Gateway Express, plus the fact that it can boost your board state. So I think that's part of the reason why that's here. The exact same build, other than that, relying on the 2 Destroy Evils and the 2 Lorns in the sideboard for your artifact and enchantment hate. So boarding those in rather than leaving them in the main board, very interesting choice. I wonder if that's signifying some sort of shift. I do want to point out Domain, Mono White, both versions of Golgari really, but more so Golgari Talent, are using key enchantments in their builds to sort of push through. We've got Lizards, we've got the Azorius Cookies Mirror, Boros Convoke. They do use artifacts, especially early for Boros. So Boros and Azorius Control also use significant enchantments, right, with the Caretaker's Talent. Boros uses Forge. So my point is basically that this sort of artifact and enchantment hate is important right now. So weigh your options carefully based on your regional meta.
And Max, I look at a list like this. There are no sweepers. Not a single sweeper is sitting around in this list. How are you going to contain a faster deck like Rakdos Lizards with the absence of sweepers?
Yeah, so here I just want to point out that this deck races pretty well with a deck like Rakdos Lizards, and then it tries to go over the top with something like Steel Seraph. Steel Seraph, of course, offering like the only lifelink in the deck. I think life gain is very important when you're facing an aggro heavy meta, and Azorius Cookies has that built in. So I think it just edges it out by racing it and using the life gain.
Gotcha. So really the key card here is Steel Seraph, and if you can stick the landing on that, which again we talked about a little bit earlier, how Rakdos Lizards is trying to start hedging for Steel Seraphs in Flesh Gorgers. So we're seeing that hedge and counter hedge coming into play here. But let's move on. Let's talk about the deck that got quite a revamp this week, Golgari Talent.
Yeah, 3 top 8 appearances, no trophies, however. Really shows that the new Golgari's resilience to go big and go low decks at the same time. But really, what will it take for this deck to finally clinch a trophy? Let's talk about these shifts from last week and what they might signify. We cut the 2 Duresses from the main board. We did add a 3rd cut down, and I think this just signifies the prevalence of early game aggro, pieces that you need to get rid of right away. They cut the 4th Innkeeper's Talent, I believe, for a single Terra Sunder, which signifies, of course, what we just said, the importance of enchantment and artifact hate, not just in the sideboard, but in the main board on game 1. They are keeping the 3 Caustic Broncos, and last week we kind of criticized that choice a little bit, but they did cut a lot of those top-end cards that we were concerned with. So only 2 Vraskas this week, to go along with the Innkeeper's Talent. No Virtues of Persistence, no Nissas. Flesh Gorgers are not in the main board, they're in the sideboard, so maybe they just swap those out for the Caustic Broncos. They did cut 2 Shellys, 2 of the Vraskas, and instead we're seeing 4 copies of Archfiend of the Dross. So I think that also signifies sort of a low curve aggro meta.
So let's talk about that a little bit. There's a shift over to 4 Archfiend of the Dross and 4 Sentinel. That's completely different than we've seen in the last 2 weeks. Why the shift over there?
Like I said, I believe the Archfiend is taking account of the low curve meta. You'll notice that, of course, it creates one situation that we love to talk about a lot: the Massacre Worm effect. If you sideboard in cards like Miasma, of course, it can do that. And also, we're seeing a lot of like control token lists and just straight up token lists. And so your opponent can't just throw tokens at you when you have Archfiend on the board. They do pay for that. And then, of course, Sentinel really just attacks and blocks effectively. The fact that it has vigilance, I think it's a 3/4 body, which is pretty significant when you're playing in a heavy aggro, low curve aggro meta.
Yeah, I suppose the ult on Innkeeper's Talent also really helps you bolster those Sentinels, and those map tokens come in handy fast there as well. So that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. You got a lot of natural parity with that. That said, let's move along and let's talk about Gruul Slickshot.
So 2 top 8 appearances, Gruul Slickshot, Gruul Prowess, whatever you want to call it, is still a part of the standard meta conversation. Definitely has not gone away, probably won't go away for some time, despite the fact that we're seeing variants like Red and Izzet as well. Let's see where this deck has gone since its reintroduction to the meta 2 weeks ago. There have been some major shifts, especially from the past couple of weeks. We're seeing 3 Demonic Ruckus over Audacity. And I think this is just because the Menace is starting to make the difference, because other aggro, other token lists are going to have the 1/1 on the board they can block with. So you need to have Menace in addition to Trample sometimes. 3 Innkeeper's Talents over the 4th piece of Protection, and over 2 Codebreakers. And I think this is just an increase in wanting the damage output turn after turn to race with the other aggro lists, especially when you have something like Slickshot on the board. We're seeing also 2 Paw Patch Recruit as an indication of this as well. Rather than adding to the protective spells to protect your key creatures, Paw Patch can sort of create a situation where targeting causes your other creatures on the board to get bigger. And so that, in some cases, can be a better situation for you.
Fair. Now, I look at a list like this, and obviously, the Innkeeper's Talent, that's pairing so nicely with the mice that trigger once per turn and allow you to draw extra cards or bump them up a little bit higher. But Rockface Village, is that the missing piece for this list that has allowed it to push forward?
It's certainly part of the equation, right? The card does work well with Valiant in particular. But that being said, we do have a Gruul deck that now features 20 creatures versus 22 just a couple of weeks ago in different iterations that were popular. We're still seeing the same number of Valiant creatures at 8, but with the concern in week 1 being having the correct mana for your non-creature spells, we were even seeing Thran Portal in some of those lists, a lot of those lists. This might actually make it more difficult for you to get your early game draw where you just explode on the opponent by turn 3, and having the correct mana to do so. So maybe this card does add, but I'm unsure if a full set like 4 copies is really appropriate. You might want maybe 2, maybe 1.
And there's definitely mana considerations for the non-creature spells that we have to take into account there. It's a lot when you're trying to do things like Rockface Village on a deck that's land light and trying to hit colored sources, maybe multiple by turn 3. So I can see where that's an issue. But let's go to the last Tier 2 deck, Boros Convoke.
Boros Convoke. Love talking about it. A single trophy by Sapoa. And Convoke is not done just yet, right? This deck really got counted out week 1. Contrary to what you've heard, this deck isn't dead. Let's see how Convoke is doing since the last time we featured it back in week 1 of Bloomburrow. It did fall off last week. We're seeing a change, the 1 copy of Skrelv over the 1 copy of Nurturing Pixie. Preserving that tier 1 artifact, having that turn 1 artifact, has become critical for this deck. Skrelv really gives us a fighting chance at that. Protects your other creatures, your big Knight Errant that often gets targeted with single target removal. We're seeing a 4-2 split between Case, Gateway Express, and Get Lost. Mid-range does cause problems for this deck if it can't really go wide fast enough, if you don't get the Demolition play off. The lack of Ward Leader's Call means that this deck needs other ways to boost the board state and get rid of those big creatures very quickly. There are no Ward Leader's Call, as I just said. We have a second Get Lost and one Takazia's Welcome that came in instead. Now, Takazia's Welcome usually signifies like a grind, like we're seeing more grindy matchups. This time around, though, usually that's because of control, board wipes, counter spells, that sort of thing. This time around, though, I think it's also because of the token and the go low decks. I think those are really causing a gummied up board state.
Well, Max, let's talk about that grind a little bit. I mean, this build, it's obviously pushing a grind, and I get why they're not playing War Leader's Call. There's so much enchantment removal that I don't think we can afford to do that one-for-one game back and forth, and at least Takazia's is going to allow you to draw cards quickly, potentially the same turn that you played if you have 4 mana and another 1-drop. But is that push to grind a stronger plan than outright speed currently? And if so, why?
So I've always been very clear about this deck's ability to rebuild after a board wipe. It's one of the things it does really well. And that always signified that you could build Convoke in a direction where the grind is more important. This time around, though, as I pointed out, the grind comes from playing versus other token decks, other decks that gummy up the board and not really letting your creatures through. That's still out there, but at least with Takazia, and then, of course, we see Fountain Port in the mana base as well, and Skrelv. It feels like Boros Convoke pilots are trying to rely a little bit less on that demolition play than in the past. I think that's obviously because we don't have Vildar and Epicure anymore, and so that turn 1 artifact isn't quite as guaranteed. They can, if it's an artifact creature, for example, like the Yodian Frontliner, they can just remove it before you get Gleeful Demolition off. So, yeah, it's starting to become a problem. So they're starting to rely more on this grindy mindset to try to get over the top.
Fair. And that'll do it for Tier 2, folks. We're going to go ahead and move on to my favorite segment every week. Love it. Brewer's Corner. Let's kick things off and talk about Orzhov Breach. Alrighty, credit to Athena the Bun. Thanks for sending the list. So for those of you who are tired of Boros control and would like to shift gears a little bit, this is the alternative path that you may want to consider. We go into black instead of red, and we get access to a few cards that grind in very specific and excellent ways. So first of all, Lord Skitter was made for Caretaker's Talent. Trigger every freaking turn while interacting with the graveyard. Fantastic. Love that. Second, Breach the Multiverse. Sometimes you just want to go bigger. This is definitely the version of the deck that says we're winning the mirror because we are going to grab the biggest, baddest thing over and over again. And if you're playing Jaces, we might just take your Jace and mill you out instead. So I like where this is positioned. This is interesting. The part I don't love about this is the mana base is a little rough. Having to play Concealed Courtyard in a deck that wants a lot of planes is a little rough. Now you get the Foreshadowy Backstreets, you get the Fabled Passages. That helps, but you do need to get up to 13 sources here, so those Concealed Courtyards have to come in. There's one other card I want to briefly talk about before we move on, and it's Campbell Profiteering Mayor. If ever there was a card that was made to break the freaking mirror of tokens, it was that card. So check the list out on Moxfield. I know we didn't get to it while it was up on the screen, because I think you're going to want to take a look at Campbell and just consider, is this the way we break that mirror?
Yeah, I'll put that card up on the screen in the post as well, so you can take a look at that. I definitely think that this card in particular, after looking at it, is going to do exactly as you just described. And the mirror is important right now because Orzhov is starting to become a more piloted deck more often, especially as mid-range becomes more relevant. So look for that to be in the meta conversation next week, and be prepared. But let's talk about an iteration of Boros involving mice. Boros, Mighty Mouse. So I've sung the praises of Heartfire Hero recently. I've been playing mice in different formats, actually, but in Standard in particular, I think this is its own little mid-game win con. Pump the heck out of Heartfire Hero, and it will pay dividends later. We've got 2 Lorn's Escapes. This is the perfect protection spell in white, right? Hexproof and indestructible. It's going to be key because you're going to have some pieces that you want to preserve. We've got 2 Nettle Guards. This acknowledges, of course, the main board artifact enchantment hate. You're going to want that in your main board, and Nettle Guard is a perfect combination of having a good stat body with the ability to do that right away. 3 Valley Quest Callers. Not a lot of people are playing this in mice, but check it out. It creates that Anthem effect, and it's a pretty strong body all onto its own. Double Mabel as well. So you've got 5 Anthem effects for mice in the deck. And then I just want to point out Rabid Gnaw, which we're starting to see crop up in some other lists as well. But 2 copies of triggers Valiant and Prowess while also acting as removal. So I think all those modes on that one card, pretty useful.
Fair. Fair. And credit to number one noob for the list. Appreciate you. But let's move it right along and let's talk about Bunny Convoke. Alrighty, so I was having some fun with different Convoke lists, and there was a Naya Bunny-esque Convoke list that came around in Brewer's Corner the other week, and I thought, what if we just get rid of the red? What if we just get rid of it? Let's make it 2-color, let's simplify the mana base and see what happens. This is where we ended up. I mean, it explodes. It's a lot faster than I thought it was going to be. But the piece that every match I was struggling with is, do they have temporary lockdown? If so, right? So I looked at all the matchups and I thought, what if we just dedicate serious amounts of sideboard to dealing with these mid-range control domain? So you'll note in the sideboard there's 4 Peacekeepers, there's 4 Aven Interrupters, there's 2 Invasions, and there's 2 Destroy Evils. We have a 12-card transitional board to deal with this plan, where we say, okay, you want to grind, we'll lose the hop to it, that's fine. We don't want those against lockdowns. We'll lose the Knight Errants. We're not even trying for the Convoke plan anymore. We'll lose, Case of the Gateway Express, and we will just shift into, we play low, early, aggressive creatures that scale as more of them come out, and then we have nothing but disruption left and right, and ways to blow up enchantments so that they lock down, it's fine. We wait till their end step, we blow up the lockdown, now we have hasty 7, power on the board, swinging right at them. This won me a lot of matches, so give it a try, guys. A lot of fun.
Bet. I tried that Naya Convoke list, and this might be the solution because temporary lockdown destroyed me every single match almost. But yeah, I can't wait to try it out myself. Let's talk about one more list for our Brewers Corner. This one been in the works for a few weeks. It's been in hushed tones. We've been talking about it in the Discord, but credit to Matt961 Rune 20 for Rakdos Fling. All right, so this is just a straight-laced hit you in the face deck, and I love it. Heartfire Heroes, Coffney Scamps, Callous Sellsword, which gives you your fling effect, Slickshot Show Off, Voldaren Thrillseeker. So those 5 creatures make up your creature suite. It's all you need. You've got full copies of Felonious Rage, full copies of Monstrous Rage to just pump your power stat. We've also got 3 Sugar Rushes. Great way to pump your power stat. 4 Fungal 402s. I didn't even know this card existed until I looked at this list, which bring your creatures back to be used again. We've got 3 Rabid Gnaws. We just talked about that card, how it synergizes really well with what this list is trying to do and acts as a piece of removal. I want to also point out the 3 Draenith Ruins, in case you forgot this card existed, among the mana base to provide another way to boost your power stat. And then in the sideboard, another card that synergizes really well, Dreadmaw's Ire, acting as artifact removal while also doing its thing to pump your power stat. And then Sunspine Links, we haven't really talked about this card a lot lately, but punishing greedy mana bases, which there certainly are some out there, but also preventing the life gain that would really be a bane to this deck.
Fair. And I mean, it's a spicy build. I don't know how reliable it's going to be. These lists always feel kind of glass cannon to me, but I'm excited to give it a shot and just see how it feels. I'm sure there's a few broken hands with it where it just feels insane on turn 3. So, we'll tinker around and see how it feels on that front. But that is going to bring us to our final segment. Now, we're trying something a little new this week, folks. We're calling this one Ahead of the Curve. And part of this, I mean, Max, we looked at 12 archetypes tonight, and in the past, we discussed our predictions in the macro sense. But starting this week, we're going to do something new. We're going to put a minute on the clock, and each of us is going to highlight the deck that we would take to a competitive standard tournament this weekend instead. And the point of this, dear listener, is to look forward to the metagame's evolution in a meaningful way and synthesize all of our earlier points into 2 viable options for you to enjoy. And with that, let's take a look at Dimir Aggro.
So we're seeing the current iteration of Dimir Aggro from the tier list today. This is a good example of why I like Dimir Aggro for the meta currently. You got access to tons of early game interaction. You have access to duresses, cut downs, 2-drop removal packages that are going to be very important for removing a lot of those really famous, infamous mid-range creatures that you're going to see, right? Your Preachers of the Schisms, your Shellies, and whatnot. I also love Fairy Mastermind right now for the meta, especially when you're seeing a ton of Caretaker's Talent being utilized in several control lists, several token lists. Even outside of those, you're seeing Caretaker's Talent. So I love where this is positioned. We've got 12 1-2 drop creatures that work well with Gix, some of them with evasion, right? Tidebinder, Urtai counters, mid-game strategies really well. And being able to disrupt domain, disrupt those go big decks, is very critical right now. Sideboard responses to low curve aggro exist within this list. You've got Eclipse, Deluges, Harvesters of Misery. And then if you want to build in a different direction, I've even seen where people have been pushing Invasion of Amonkhet and Aclazotz is a really neat combo in Dimir Aggro. So you can use this list, but I think Dimir Aggro overall as an archetype is well positioned for what we're seeing right now.
So going into this weekend, that's the list you're picking up and you're throwing down.
Absolutely.
Fair. All right, and on my end, let's talk about mono white control. So this is the personal list that I've been tuning up all week. The sideboard guide to this deck is available for all the people who become coffee and grinders as a member of this YouTube channel. I've got it written up. I'm working on it. I keep tuning it. Enjoy. That said, let's take a look at why this is working and why I'm playing this build in particular. Now, this only has 24 lands. The difference here between my list and Tulio's list is that I like the Frontier Seekers. I think they're a little bit more aggressive. They give you a smooth mana base, and they allow you to cut down to 24 lands so you don't flood quite as often. I like where that's positioned because it also opens up an extra 2 slots in the main, which is how I'm putting this little Lorne in here, and I'm putting an Imidanes in the main. That's where those 2 slots are coming from. Now, I shifted out that second Mirrex into another Plains because, frankly, we have to hit with Frontier Seeker, and we don't have Fortune anymore. Like we went over to Sanguine Evangelist. It was the right call. It's definitely won me games, but that's the price we pay, is we need that 15th Plains in the main right there. Outside of that, I love that we have Dust Animus in here, and I love that we have 10 ways to blow up enchantments, and I believe at least 5 to blow up artifacts in this. It's worked out beautifully for me so far.
Yeah, I like the inclusion of Dust Animus a lot. I believe that card is undervalued and not played enough. And then, of course, we've been just iterating and reiterating week after week the strength of artifacts and enchantments and main boards right now. So you got to have that hate. And I think this deck is super well positioned if we continue to see that in the meta. So, yeah, props to you. That's a good choice. But that's another week in the books, folks. Thank you for supporting us. And really a special shout out to everybody who signed up, who has signed up to join the Rebellion, all the members who support the Rebellion by watching this all the way through as well. Thank you for all of that. We'll be back next week with more analysis.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on this video. Every click helps, folks, so please do so. And until next time, Rebels, untap, upkeep, resist.